My girlfriend left a message on the wrong phone. She was trying to contact the guy she was cheating on me with, but accidentally called me, left a message about me. I won't go into the details of the message, but the whole situation was just incredibly awkward and heartbreaking for me. What do you think of this story? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Enjoy. What's the worst thing you've accidentally overheard? Story 1. I was home alone as a 12-year-old, and my dad's friend called the house. I let it go to voicemail, and he left a bizarre voicemail about my dad being the best friend he'd ever had. My dad came home 10 minutes later, and I told him about the voicemail. Dad tried to call him, and he didn't pick up. It turned out he shot himself immediately after leaving the voicemail, which was a pretty big mental time bomb for me. Story 2. We don't need to care about him since he's adopted. I was maybe 10, vacationing with some family friends at a local summer resort. The family was trying forever to have a baby, and after 10-something years decided to adopt a toddler. A year later, the woman got pregnant, ended up having 2 more bio kids, and still loved her adopted still the same. The husband, however, became indifferent to their adopted and spoiled the bio baby rotten, and took pleasure in making sure the adopted knows this. He made a lot of jokes of returning the kid since he is not blood related anyways, and other comments that were hurtful and out of line. Soon cousins of the kid started to taunt this poor 4-year-old who was confused of why he was being teased. Mind you, this happened in a 1-day span too. Mom tried to shield him as much as she can, and the husband made a serious faux pas of making that comment in front of 10 other people from church too. He tried to backpedal fast, but not before my scary mother, the leader of the friend group, ripped him a new one. He never joined us anymore in gatherings, and eventually the whole family moved to another town months later. Story 3. I'd been on holiday for about a month, on the other side of the world to my family. I had FaceTimed my mom and told her what I was up to, found out what was going on back home, just normal conversation. Eventually we said bye and Mom ended the call, or so she thought. Shed just paused it so the audio was still coming through. I heard my little sister ask her, "Are you crying?" And Mom said, "Not now." I quickly hung up. I think she missed me and didn't want me to know she was sad. Story 4. Waiting to Skype call my long-distance girlfriend, and before the video comes on, the audio peaks up, heard her roommate yell to her, "You gonna dump that sorry little boy now?" Yeah, she immediately turned off the feed and broke up with me over Skype text instead. Nice. Story 5. It was when I was a kid, and it was just my single mom and I living in a house together. She had late-stage ovarian cancer that was getting worse. One afternoon, she told me she was tired and needed to go lay down in her room. Totally common with her condition, so nothing struck me as odd. I went to her room with a glass of water to put by her bed for when she woke up. But right as about to turn the knob to get into her room, I was thrown off guard when I heard her voice, and it sounded like she was incredibly emotional and sad. There was no phone in her room, and I knew nobody was over at our house visiting. It took me a minute of eavesdropping to realize that she was using a tape recorder to record her last goodbyes to me for after she died. She died 2 weeks later. I found the tape. This was years ago, and I still haven't been able to get myself to listen to it. The memory of being there while she was recording it, and the memory of my naive adolescent self finally realizing that my mom was about to die, is just too overwhelming for me still. But I'm glad to know that one day when I'm ready, I will have a recording of her voice to listen to. Answer, dear Reddit community, it is with a heavy heart that I write this farewell message to express my reasons for departing from this platform that has been a significant part of my online life. Over time, I have witnessed changes that have gradually eroded the welcoming and inclusive environment that initially drew me to Reddit. It is the actions of the CEO in particular that have played a pivotal role in my decision to bid farewell. For me, Reddit has always been a place where diverse voices could find a platform to be heard, where ideas could be shared and discussed openly. Unfortunately, recent actions by the CEO have left me disheartened and disillusioned. The decisions made have demonstrated a departure from the principles of free expression and open dialogue that once defined this platform. Reddit was built upon the idea of being a community-driven platform where users could have a say in the direction and policies. However, the increasing centralization of power and the lack of transparency in decision-making have created an environment that feels less democratic and more controlled. Furthermore, the prioritization of certain corporate interests over the well-being of the community has led to a loss of trust. Reddit's success has always been rooted in the active participation and engagement of its users. By neglecting the concerns and feedback of the community, the CEO has undermined the very foundation that made Reddit a vibrant, in dynamic space. I want to emphasize that this decision is not a reflection of the countless amazing individuals I have had the pleasure of interacting with on this platform. It is the actions of a few that have overshadowed the positive experiences I have had here. As I embark on a new chapter away from Reddit, I will seek alternative platforms that prioritize user empowerment, inclusivity, and transparency. I hope to find communities that foster open dialogue and embrace diverse perspectives. To those who have shared insightful discussions, provided support, and made me laugh, I am sincerely grateful for the connections we have made. Your contributions have enriched my experience, and I will carry the memories of our interactions with me. Farewell, Reddit. May you find your way back to the principles that made you extraordinary. Sincerely, NAB Dad. Story 6. I don't know if this counts as overheard or not, but I guess this kind of counts. One night back in 2005, I was getting ready for bed when my phone rang. "Hi, are you the wrong baked potato?" "Yes," I responded. I dislike to ask this, but my daughter had a son a long time ago and gave him away. I've been looking for him since he was born. Do you know who all of your grandparents are? Were you adopted? Unfortunately for her, I knew my whole biological family. I recounted my family history and how I couldn't possibly be her wrong baked potato. She asked me a few times if I was sure, absolutely sure, but I had to specify that I was. Then she asked me a bit about myself, what I did in school, and what I did for a living. I think she was trying to imagine what her lost grandson, who just happened to share my name, might be like. I hope that poor lady found her grandson. Story 7. After speaking with my grandpa on the phone before he properly hung up, I heard him commenting to my uncle how ungrateful I was. I had at that point visited every week for a year and cleaned his entire bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, hallway, and living room every single goddarn week, usually bringing some food or dessert with me. I moved out of town shortly after this. Answer: my husband's father is a narcissistic jerk that always ropes in his family and then delivers low blows as soon as they get close enough. He left a message with my husband talking about how he really wants to talk with him and settle things out. Then he thought he hung up and then talked shoot about how my husband is an ungrateful little shoot. My husband has been through it enough to know better and just cracked up about the whole thing. Hope you recover from this quickly. Being betrayed by family really sucks. People really suck sometimes, including our families. Story 8. My family and I were at a restaurant, and there was a father and his daughter, we'll call D for daughter, sitting in the booth right across the aisle from us. D looked to be no more than 20 years old. She talks the whole time about her ex, Chris. Apparently, Chris was married and D did not give two shoot. She said it was the wife's fault for not being good enough to keep her husband faithful. Well, Chris was still sleeping with his wife because she got pregnant. When D found out wife was pregnant, D told Chris he had to choose between her and his wife. At first, Chris chose D. Then he found out his unborn child had congenital heart defects. So he called off the divorce, broke up with D, and moved back in with his wife. D sits there in silence, looking slightly bewildered before saying, "I don't know why he chose her and the retard baby. So what if it dies? They can always make another one." But that's not the worst part. Her dad breaks his silence and asks, "So your mom and Chris aren't getting divorced?" "Your mom and Chris? Your mom?" This batshit crazy meanie was having a blatant affair with her much older stepfather, made him choose between her and her pregnant mother, and then made sociopathic comments about her unborn brother. Edit. Thanks for the upvotes, everyone. I would like to clarify a few things. This conversation took place at a Mimi's Cafe in the East Valley of the Phoenix, Arizona metro area. She was 100 white trash from head to toe. My family seriously were expecting a camera crew for a prank-type TV show to show up. It's hard to fathom someone that demonic truly does walk amongst us. Also, I'm not positive the man she was dining with was her father. He looked old enough and they had similar facial features. Answer: this batshit crazy meanie was having a blatant affair with her much older stepfather, made him choose between her and her pregnant mother, and then made sociopathic comments about her unborn brother. I mean, she sounds like a terrible person, but given the age difference and power dynamic of a stepfather, her stepfather sounds like an even worse person. Also, her dad sounds pretty terrible too. Story 9. Two of my best friends in high school had a conference call about me. I just happened to be with the third friend they called and overheard how they thought I was annoying, and I'm only friends with this other person for popularity. Stop being friends with them shortly after this. Answer: on the Black Friday of my senior year of high school, I had stayed up all night so that I could go to the mall with my friends. I didn't have much money, but it was more about the fun of getting to go to the mall at 3 a.m. with my BFFs and maybe get one or two things. The friend whose house I am staying at calls the only girl in our group with a car and asks her where she was. My friend puts her on speaker while as she continues to get ready, and I hear the other girl on the line say, "Is Obi-Wan your homie there already? Ugh, I don't even know why she's going. She's so poor." I called my dad at 2 a.m. holding back tears, asking him to pick me up. I heard the disgust in her voice and my heart just sank. I never felt comfortable in that friend group ever again, and once I graduated, I didn't speak to any of them again. I had another friend much later on tell me that I had become a mean girl TM after I started hanging out with them, and I felt awful about it. Story 10. I was 14 years old and it was the end of 8th grade. I fudge disliked middle school and was picked on mercilessly. As the end of the year celebration, we went to one of those putt-putt driving, range batting, cage places, and my older brother came and visited for lunch. He was like 19 and home from college, and it was really sweet of him to do. I also have to note that objectively, my brother is very attractive. At the time, he was a college swimmer, so he was in really good shape, and all my friends were gaga about him. When I was in line to get some more food, I heard these two meanie girls in front of me go, "How does she have such a hot brother when she turned out so bad?" Oof, my poor, fragile 14-year-old self-esteem. I pretended I hadn't heard them, left the line, and managed not to burst into tears. Teenage girls can be so cruel. Answer: when I was in 8th grade, I had a crush on this kid who was super popular. I mentioned one day that I liked him to this girl who was a closet bully. Well, as the weeks went on, the kid that I liked seemed to have really liked me back, and I thought I had a chance with him. Well, one day my class went on a field trip, and I'm on the bus sitting alone, and I overhear him and the girl I told make fun of me. At one point, the kid said that he would never date someone like me, but it was really fun to lead me on and make me think that he would. Well, fast forward to today. I'm a senior year in college. He knocked up the first girl he ever had intimacy with and does substances. If only the little 13-year-old me knew that was how he was going to turn out, maybe I wouldn't have cried so much. Yup, middle schoolers can be nasty. Story 11. Not that much of an accident, but my mom caught my dad having an affair, and I overheard her as she was yelling at the top of her lungs while my dad was sobbing, begging her to take him back. Never looked at my dad the same way after that. Eat it. Just for some more background, I was 16 when this happened, and I'm now 30. My parents are still together. Answer: I was going to post a couple similar situations. One, I was home alone, maybe 12 or 13, and the phone rang, but I saw it was my dad's cousin calling. So I let the answering machine pick up. My dad's cousin left a message screaming, saying he's coming over and he's got a gun. This was pretty scary, and this was how I found out my dad was having an affair with his cousin's wife. After that, I got to overhear mom's reaction and their screaming match that followed. 2. Fast forward, 5 years? Dad got busted again, cheating with his friend's wife, also my friend's mom. The dust had settled, and I thought I was home alone. Apparently, my dad thought he was home alone too, as he took a phone call from the other woman, going on and on about how they were going to be together and live happily ever after. Story 12. No, I wouldn't ever date that kid. He is ugly. A crush of mine in middle school describing why she wouldn't ever go out with me while she didn't know I was walking a few people behind her in the hall. It got a good laugh from everyone else, but middle school me did not like that moment very much. LOL. Also, probably not the worst thing I have ever heard, but it's all I can remember right now. Story 13. I overheard my long-term boyfriend's mom talking negatively about me multiple times when she didn't think I was around. We have been dating a long time, and I try to be as thoughtful as possible. It is what it is, I guess. I can't make her like me or change the way she is. Story 14. Brought this up in another thread like a month ago. On my first day of college while waiting online at the bookstore. I know you should never buy books at the college LOL. 2 girls were behind me on the line, talking about a cute guy in front of them on the line. I naturally took this to think it was me, and it raised my ego quite a bit, until one of them tapped me on the shoulder and asking me to get the attention of the guy just ahead of me online. Story 15. Was bartending on our busiest day. People were waiting everywhere, even outside. Family is a little loud and rowdy. A kid about 8 can't be still. Him and a guy seems to be about late 20s are wrestling and acting up. Kid is yelling no and screaming. People are kind of used to them at this point. Suddenly, guy starts yelling, "I am going to grab your male body part," and says it a few times. Kid is yelling no. The entire restaurant got dead silent, and everyone was jaw-dropped. Staring finally after a bit too long, the mother is like, WTF, can't say that or act like that, and they all go outside. Answer: The older one might have had a developmental disability. In fact, I'd say it's quite likely. A real pedophile would be self-aware enough not to say that. The big kid just got it carried away playing with someone who was his intellectual peer and forgot to understand the etiquette and context of that statement. It's embarrassing for the family, but the alternative is never taking the big guy out, which would be a shame. Story 16. So guy at work was on his cell phone. He starts getting louder and louder. Eventually, he is basically yelling into his phone. He was on the phone with his wife, verbally abusing her and yelling about how bad he was going to beat her when he got home. Security was called. He was fired and the police were contacted about the potential abuse. Story 17. When I worked at Waffle House, the location I worked at was part of the prison work release program. Our grill guy was a convict in for burglary and a few other charges. I'd say he worked there for maybe 6-8 months. Over the course of that 6-8 months, he became romantically involved with a customer. Also, behind her back, he was going up to the motel behind us for some steamy times with a few other servers. He was stringing a whole bunch of girls along. The girl who was his girlfriend wouldn't believe anything bad about him, and she was a very young, sweet, naive girl, and I felt bad for her TBH. Me and my fellow older seen-it-all lady servers tried to tell her, but she wouldn't listen. Anyway, one night the girlfriend was there, and the two of them were in the stockroom doing whatever it was they did in there. I was on my way out the back door to throw some trash in the dumpster, and I heard her say, "You mean just leave?" So I started to listen. He's trying to talk her into hopping in her van, grabbing her 2-year-old, and taking off to Alabama with him. Troubled, I headed out front to mull over what I should do. Deep down, I thought, surely she's not that stupid. We got slammed right after this, and one of the other complicit servers filled in for him on the grill so he could spend time with her in the closet. I had no time to think about what to do after that. I didn't realize they'd actually done it until the CO that came to pick him up was there, asking where he was. Everyone had disappeared at that point, knowing what was coming, leaving me to be the one to have to tell the guy he escaped. And I was pissed, beyond pissed. I just stood there, jaw clenched, staring at the prison guard angrily. He knew what I was about to say before I even said it. Fudge me. They took off, and I knew what was coming after that. I knew the fudge news would be there. I knew I was going to be questioned. Oh my God, I was so incredibly mad. I could have turned into the sun. I was mad at them too. Him for being such an incredible dumbass doing this when he only had 3 months left on his sentence. Her for being so stupid as to torpedo her life and get her kid taken away. I like both of them somewhat. Pair of fudge dumbasses. So I got questioned and avoided being put on TV. Thank God. Thank God. And the manhunt ensued. All the second shift servers but me got fired or sent to other stores after it was found out what they had all been doing. Some other things came out about them too, so it wasn't just for the escape incident. As to the pair of dumbasses, she was found about a week later in Alabama, alone in a park because he'd abandoned her. Then a few days later, he was found at his dad's house. Got 6 more years added to his sentence. She got her kid taken, lost her job, and 2 years in prison, which she only had to serve about 6 months of. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Everybody in this story was stupid, including me. Story 18. Once I was waiting for the elevator in my building, and a guy came out of his apartment and screamed into his phone the following quote, "Ahem, I could suck your male body part and I still wouldn't be gay." We both looked at each other in shock as he receded into his home. Story 19. We had this class in high school that was out of campus, so a school bus had to take us. The bus would drop us off and stay there parked until the class ended, and the bus driver would drive us back. Class was an hour long. Bus driver waited inside the bus with the ignition off. It was finals for that class, but I had finished it a day earlier than everyone, so I decided to stay on the bus and fall asleep. Bus driver proceeds to have the most explicit and dirty conversation with his wife. His wife on the phone, stuff like, "I'm gonna tie you up, whip you, and fudge you" type stuff. Mind you, this class was at 8 a.m. How horny do you have to be to have these conversations at 8 a.m. LMAO? He was oblivious that I was on the bus since I was close to the back. He eventually realized later, during the drive back, that I never got off the bus since he never saw me get back on. But I was there somehow. He gave me a stare of pure shame on the rearview mirror. It was hilarious and weird. Story 20. Was eating at a Joe's Crab Shack several years ago. Our server was a younger black guy, so we're all done eating. Restaurant is fairly empty. All of a sudden, we hear him clear as day in the kitchen. "What? Nah, I will knock your motherfucking head off." Then we see him walk out of the kitchen with a manager. He goes outside for a few minutes to cool off, presumably. A short time later, he comes out with the desserts a couple people at our table ordered and says all cheery, "So, who had the cheesecake?" It was so weird. Story 21. I was visiting my brother from out of state, ETA, I'm female. We went to the store, he dropped me off at his college apartment, and then he and my dad went to run a different errand. My brother's landline phone rang. I went to answer it, but it went straight to his answering machine. This was a while ago, 1999. The message was a male voice saying, "Benish, hey, I saw you just a little while ago with a kind of ugly girl." It edited to add, "Your frustration at trying to figure out how this made sense in the above sentence is me, a 40 person, trying to understand some of the pop culture references you gosh darn kids throw around." Story 22. I was 14 and I overheard my mother talking with a doctor about my younger sister's cancer treatment. I had no idea she had cancer. She had no idea she had cancer. As soon as she got off the phone, I asked her what was going on. She burst into tears. I burst into tears. My little sister was 8 at the time and had been ill for months, so I helped my parents talk to her. It was very upsetting. We shortly after took her to a clinic 500 miles away, spent a week there, no cancer, no leukemia, misdiagnosed. She had an abscess that caused her symptoms. Easily treated, but I'll never forget hearing the phone call. Story 23. When I was 12, I overheard my stepdad saying to my mom how much better their life would be without me there, and how awful I am and how he wishes I wasn't there. My mom just agreed. I wasn't even a bad kid. Did well in school, never got in trouble. I could be a stroppy teenager. He was an awful, manipulative, violent misogynist, and I wish he wasn't here. Story 24. I guess it wasn't so much an accident as it was an inevitability, but as I was entering my dorm one day freshman year of college, a girl who was sitting in the courtyard shouted to her friend who was right behind me, "The doctor says nothing is wrong with me. I just have an abnormal nipple." Story 25. When I was 7, we had 2 house phones in different parts of the house. I heard the phone ring one time, and my parents were both holed up in my dad's office and picked up the phone, which I thought was weird. I picked up the other phone to satiate my curiosity, only to hear some lady screaming at my mom about how bad my dad was in bed, and she doesn't care about him anyway, just wanted to get ahead at work. Was a lot to swallow at the time and an awkward afternoon. Story 26. I was on a cruise and reading a book in one of the lounges. This very upset woman sat sort of behind me, and her husband was with her. She was crying because their vet had some bad news about their dog, and she was trying to call the vet. She told the husband after she got off the phone that she needed 15 men to listen to a song by herself and collect her thoughts. He asked if he could get her anything, and she said no. She just wanted to be alone for a minute. Once he left, she called her boyfriend and started giving him grief about girls liking his pictures on Instagram and how jealous she was and was making plans to sneak off to call him later. Scumbag. Story 27. I was on a coach bus traveling to another state, and I woke up to someone whispering, "Hey, remember what we said earlier?" I thought they were about to argue again since they were going back and forth about something earlier, only to hear muffled sucking noises. At first I was like, "What?" Then was like, "Ooh." Story 28. I was around 8 or 9 years old. It was early morning around Christmas time. I was laying in bed and I could hear my mom talking to somebody on the phone downstairs. She was talking loud enough for me to hear every word she was saying, and she ended up confirming my suspicions. Santa was not real. She said something along the lines of, "If Woo Jurassic Things wants to still believe in him, then I will let him." Later that day, I was snooping around the Christmas tree looking at presents, and I saw a few gifts for me that were from Santa. This was at least a few days before Christmas, so the secret was out. My mom really dropped the ball that year. Answer? And that night, Santa appeared and took you on a long, heartfelt ride, showing you mother's hard life through moments of past Christmases from toddler to adult. A rare 1980s doll being the catalyst for the passing of her love for the magic of Christmas. Then, as you awoke and found that wrapped gift left by Santa, you woke her up with it and her heart melted, resurrecting her love of the holidays. Credits roll. Story 29. This crazy lady in a pizza shop was talking to herself, going on about how she disliked niggers, Jews, fat people. The list goes on. So I turned around and asked if she was okay. Then I got a fudge you, fudge ginger, and that was the end of that. It was low-key really funny because everyone gave me that "I'm sorry" look, and then they all silently shamed her. Then she got even more pissed and talked to herself louder. I didn't stay long enough to see if she got kicked out. Story 30. My mother and father were arguing it one night. My mother had a bunch of pill bottles on the kitchen counter. My father, sister, and I woke up because they were so loud. We got out of bed, watched them arguing. Our father said to our mother right in front of us, "Go ahead and eliminate yourself, but I'm not taking care of these kids." Our mother looked at us and walked past us and went to bed. Our father then yelled at us to go back to bed. Our ages were 8, 6, and 4. Story 31. When I was a teenager, our bedroom doors were nothing but shutters with handles. Way too many times did I have to listen to my, still underage at the time, older sister have phone intimacy while I was trying to sleep. Edit FFS, people. I'm female and she's a meanie. Even if she was hot, I'd still want to throat punch her for trying to get me grounded for eavesdropping when I told her to STFU at 2 a.m. through 2 doors and down a hallway. Story 32. A few months ago in the gym, 3 guys were talking very loudly. I could hear them over my music. The weight room was pretty empty. One was talking about how his girlfriend was such a meanie for not putting out. He detailed all her excuses, then went on to say, at least he had his other girlfriend. One of the other ones piped up and said, he should just wait until she falls asleep because then she can't do anything about it. They all cackled, and he said he'd thought of that before, but now he'd have to try it. Completely vile humans. Story 33. So after we adopted our baby girl, my grandparents came up to visit my mom. I was chatting with them, small talk and whatnot. They were acting uncomfortable, glared at me, snide remark here and there about why did I adopt her. So I go to use the bathroom, but it's already in use. While standing by the door waiting, this exchange happened. Grandpa, leave it to him to bring that squint into this country. Grandma, she, my daughter, is worse than that dam his sister pushed out a few years ago. So yay. Had to pick up my daughter and leave before not being able to control my behavior and beat the hell out of 2 elderly people. FYI, my daughter is Chinese. My nephew is African-American descent. Edit. Oh wow, what taking a day away from the internet will do to an inbox. So a bit more info. I was in a rush to get my kids to their activities yesterday. My grandparents and I have had a strained but reasonably civil relationship before this. My mom, their daughter, never measured up to what they thought would be a good person. Both my sisters and I think we have an awesome mother and more or less follow in her footsteps as far as morals, outlook, etc. This of course meant my sisters and I never really measured up to our cousins, who were great people in our grandparents' eyes. Apparently both my grandparents were stationed in Pearl Harbor, Grandpa as a mechanic and Grandma as a nurse. Both witnessed the kamikaze, saw friends die around the airport and in hospitals. According to my great aunts and great uncles, their brothers and sisters, my grandparents came back with a deep hatred of Asians, not just those responsible for their friends' deaths, but all Asians. During my 7th grade year in school, my history teacher was a WW2 and Korean War vet. Being a private school, we didn't follow the normal curriculum, but rather discussed the major intricacies leading up to WW2 and the worldwide aftermath. Basically, China and Japan didn't like each other. This has stuck in my mind pretty well after all these years. So for my grandparents to dislike all Asians is just SMH. Anyway, to answer a few questions in this edit, that exchange took place in the summer of 2005. My daughter was 1 at the time. She's now 14 and is totally awesome. She also has a younger brother, also from China, who is also awesome. Yeah, I'm lucky as fudge to have them in my life. My grandpa died about 2 years ago, Grandma a few months later. Apparently they took me and my little sister, the one with the African-American son, out of their will. After listening to them back in 2000, I didn't want their money. We already donate to 2 charities that help Chinese orphans. Any inheritance they would have given us would have gone straight to those charities. My mother still doesn't know I heard this. She has 2 sisters that were beloved by Grandpa and Grandma. She also has had a multitude of really great aunts and uncles that she lived with more than her parents. Grandpa was physically abusive, probably PTSD after Pearl Harbor would be my guess. My mom turned out to be a great person, despite my grandparents. Hell, she went with my wife and I to China to help with our daughter while we were there finishing up our paperwork. The real kicker in this entire mess, 3 of my 4 grandparents, Grandma in this story came here from Germany, Grandpa from Ireland, were first-generation immigrants from Europe back in the early 1920s. Only my dad's dad has a long-term lineage here in the States. I was furious when I overheard their chat, but had to stop myself because I knew being dad from jail would be rough, and my daughter needed a dad. We had already started paperwork to adopt our son. Having even a misdemeanor, beat the hell out of old people conviction would have stopped that instantly. Story 34. I once overheard in a bus a woman explaining to her friend that she didn't like that her new BF 10-year-old daughter had to live with them because her mom was in hospital, so she had hidden money and valuables in the little girl bag and was planning to confront her about the theft with BF present and get her kicked out of the house. When that turbo cunt friend asked where the girl would go when she was kicked out, mom in hospital and all that, that monster of a woman answered, "She can sleep under the bridge or work on her back like her SLT of a mother. I don't give a sh. This is my man, and she could die for all I care." I swear if that poor kid had been with them, I would have brought her home with me. I am no maternal by any way but some things, and people are just nightmarish. Story 35. I'm brown-skinned. Once I was walking in my town and accidentally bumped shoulders with someone. I said sorry, he just sort of grumbled. Shit-skinned terrorist seminar under his breath. I just kept walking, but man, that guy was a cunt. Though to be fair, I did quite like the word shit-skin. Story 36. When I was about 8 months pregnant, I woke up from a nap and accidentally heard my boyfriend blowing our best friend in the living room. I put my ear to the floor to try to confirm my suspicion. After a few minutes, I quietly came out of our bedroom, but he heard me and covered up before I was able to catch them in the act. But they knew I knew. Story 37. I was hanging out with some friends in their dorm my freshman year of college. It started to get late, and one of the guys who lived there left to spend the night at his girlfriend's, leaving me, my friend, and a girl he'd just met earlier that day in one of his classes. I offered to head out too, and my friend said, "No way, man, it's still early." So I stuck around a little longer. We were hanging out, watching TV and playing card games. So at the time, I didn't feel like I was being a third wheel. But it got increasingly later, and we decided to throw in a movie. My friend then said, "You should just stay and crash on the floor." Being lazy and tired, I gladly accepted and settled in to fall asleep for the movie. The two of them settled on the couch behind me, out of view, and in hindsight, that's when I should have taken it upon myself to volunteer to leave. Cut to halfway through the movie, around 1 or 2 a.m., I start to hear rustling behind me. My friend thought I was asleep and began to make his move on the girl. Only problem is I was wide awake. I was torn. Do I eliminate the mood and mention that I'm awake and get up and leave? Or do I be a good wingman, pretend to be asleep, and let them have their fun? I decided to take one for the team and try my hardest to focus on the movie that was on, during which the situation ramped up and I overheard pretty much all the sounds of him fingering her, squishing, moaning, heavy breathing, you name it, it was happening. Eventually it came to an end, and so did the movie. At that point, there was no way I was falling asleep, so I just laid there in the dark trying to decide if they were asleep and I could sneak out, or if they were still awake and me getting up would be super awkward. I'm not sure how much time passed, but eventually the other roommate came back, and I used that as the perfect opportunity to have the light from the hallway shine in and wake me up. My friend and his new lady friend also woke up, and I said my quick goodbyes and escaped to my own dorm to get an actual bit of sleep. TLDR. I overheard my friend fingering a girl while they thought I was asleep and was too awkward to just get up and leave when it was just starting. Story 38. I used to work in an office with mostly women. At one point, one of my jobs was scanning large files in the back of the filing room. So many times, two or groups of women would come in, not think anyone else was in there, and proceed to talk about their intimacy lives. I was using a high production scanner. That thing is not quiet. Not sure how they didn't know I wasn't back there. Some of the things they would say were vile. Edit, more than a few of the women I worked with were into butt intimacy. Story 39. Was in the emergency room for 5 hours with a semi-ruptured appendix. I was out there so long, passing out and coming to. I thought I was going to die. Turns out there was a Greyhound that ran over a minivan with a family inside. Everyone but the driver made it out okay. When they finally took me back, I heard a doctor say to a woman, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. We did everything we could, but your husband didn't make it. That wasn't the part that was bad. It was what happened next." The woman made a sound that struck me to the core. They'll never forget it. It's been almost 20 years ago, and it still makes me tear up thinking about it. The sound elicited so many emotions of anger and disbelief and sadness. There's just something about that sound coming from another human. The wailing, half-sobbing, muttering scream that it was. Definitely the worst thing I have ever overheard. Answer. I went to college with the intention of becoming a doctor, so I took a job as a nurse's aide at the Chute local hospital in the summer of my sophomore year. I am an athletic guy, so I ended up having to do chest compressions on 6 occasions that summer. Every single one of them died. That fall, I changed my major to computer engineering. I had reoccurring nightmares for years about doing CPR on family members. To this day, the smell of a hospital will make me nauseous. Story 40. I work front door security at a courthouse. I hear crazy shoot all day long. The following happened this morning, right after we opened the doors. Yeah, but she's your daughter. You can't have intimacy with her. She's 18, so it's legal, I think. Let's ask them. He motions to the deputies I work with, and one of the deputies, I'm not answering that question. Keep walking. Story 41. As my friend and I were waking through a parking lot, leaving a farmer's market, we heard a toddler screaming and shouting, "I want a lollipop! I want a lollipop!" over and over. The very stressed out looking mother snapped back at him with not only, "You're never getting a lollipop ever," but follows that up with, "You're an embarrassment. Not even you're embarrassing me, just you're an embarrassment." My friend and I held our lips really tight until we got to our car. Story 42. A girl in math class talking to her friend about having intimacy with a girl, talked about taking it slow, and then they talked about fingering. All that happened then, I looked up, they were looking at me, and to see if I had a boner. I didn't, so they said maybe I'm into butt stuff. The two girls were hot, but fudge that went from 0 to the speed of light. Story 43. I know I favor brother over Charlotte at house. I can't help it. She just irritates the piss out of me. She's always has. Even when she was a little, bio dad, and I would fight about her all the time. He spoiled her and told me I was too hard on her. Is half the reason we split. So yeah, maybe I do have a favorite, but it's not like she wasn't his favorite. It balanced out. My mom, when I was 23, a family member called her out on how she treated me versus my brother, and this was her justification. Saying I was the favorite of a man I couldn't even remember because he left before I was 2. And apparently those 2 years was the same as her favoring my brother all our lives. Oh, and bonus blaming me for their divorce. Thank Mom. Story 44. My mom's stepdad going through a rough patch about 17 years ago after he found out he was going to lose his job. He got pretty down, stopped wanting to do anything outside the house. Unfortunately, part of that was getting snippy with my mom about money. It all came to a head after a month or so. I heard them argue about finances, their relationship, talking about possible divorce. I was already having problems of my own because of the pressure of college classes, 40-hour full-time work, on top of doing all the stuff around the house that my stepdad didn't want to help with. I about had a nervous breakdown in the most pissed off, frustrated tone, looked at them both, said, "Why can't you fudge talk like fudge adults instead of arguing like fudge children?" They got the hint. We all sat down, had a family heart-to-heart. They eventually went to counseling. Stepdad got a new job. They'll be celebrating 25 years together next year. It's amazing how people can turn their attitudes around when they realize that their bullshit isn't just affecting them, but everyone else too. Story 45. I had my son, and about 2 months after he was born, I was called a lazy mother by my own mother. A couple months later, she was on the phone with one of her friends claiming I abused my son because I let him cry a bit longer than she deemed necessary. I was outside her door at 2 a.m. to bring him back to bed. I was 21 and was shell-shocked with being a mom so suddenly. Didn't find out I was pregnant until I was almost 5 months along. I was rushed into a lot of things. Answer, my mom was similar. She actually cursed me out worse than a don because I had a colicky baby with stranger anxiety. My aunt was offering to hold the baby, but I knew it would make her stressed on top of being colicky. So I said, no, I'd rather you get me the bottle instead, which my aunt was fine with. But my mom decided the best course of action would be to curse me out and threaten to throw me and the baby out on the street because I was stupid and lazy. My aunt had to tell her to lay off of me, and that aunt is considered the mean one of the family. Story 46. My landlord sometimes comes into my apartment without notice for reasons I do not know. I've caught it on tape. There's not much to be done about it, apparently. The acoustics of the hallway are such that if people are talking in a normal voice out there, you can clearly hear their conversation from inside the apartment. I've been laid off of work for 9 months now, so I've not plated my car and instead rode my bike around, and the car just sits there. Granted, I am home most of the time, but my car is no indication. I suffer from bipolar disorder, OCD, and a lot of anxiety. So I've got a bunch of self-affirming quotes pinned up on my wall. You don't want to hurt yourself. You don't dislike your life. You dislike the way you feel sometimes. You're a good person. Just stop and breathe. Heck, this all seems random. Let me put it together. A couple of months ago, someone was viewing the place across the hall from me, and the landlord was talking with him. I heard her make comments about how I never leave the house or have people over because I am so mentally ill. She had obviously seen my quote wall, probably my prescriptions on the counter too. She specifically made a comment to the affect of, I have a feeling that one might off himself and leave me with a huge mess to clean up. How I was weak, unwilling to try, ECT. How she's so strong because she was depressed for a couple weeks before. She went for a walk every day and started feeling great. If I would leave the apartment once in a while, I wouldn't have these problems. She went on about how I don't work and I'm probably on welfare to pay rent. Spewed a bunch about how welfare should change so lazy people like me are forced to take charge of their lives. Like 5 full minutes of making the worst possible assumptions about me with no real info, insulting me, and airing my secrets to this stranger who she's known 10 minutes, frankly, to everyone on this floor who was at home and paying any type of attention to the talk from the hallway. I also learned from that conversation that the child of the young lady down the hall from me is a fatherless bastard. Her boyfriend beat her and is in jail now, and she's trying to raise the kid on her own. While she was talking about me, I really wanted to open my door and say something. She was 2 feet away on the other side. I had no idea what to say, though, and quite frankly, all the things she had said had upset me to the point that I didn't trust myself to conduct myself in the best manner. A couple of minutes after she quit talking about me and started talking about the lady down the hall, I just backed away from my door 10 feet, pretended I was talking on a phone, and loudly said, "You wouldn't believe how loud the hallway can get. You should hear this fat cunt landlord and the way she talks about people." Then I very quickly summed up what she said about me, then pretended to change topic and move back deeper into my apartment. Once they heard me start talking, they stopped, and I'm sure she heard me. I guess on the plus side, I got to rightfully call my landlord a cunt to her face without any repercussions. Answer: I had a similar landlord. She was just as nasty and judgmental. One evening, my adult son was in the apartment using my computer, and I was not there. She let herself into the apartment and started yelling that he was living there and physically pushed him. He stated he was just there that evening using my PC for, and then he called me as to what he should do. I told him to call the local police and file a report. He did this, and to make a long story short, I was able to legally break the lease and move with the following month. Story 47. I had been on the phone with my best friend. She said bye and thought she hung up. I was cleaning my room at the time and my phone was on a speakerphone. I didn't walk over to my phone to end the call since it would have automatically ended when she hung up. She said bye, and then I start to hear her mom's voice in the background. "I don't know why you spend so much time talking to her. There's just nothing special about her. She's not like your other friends. She's not funny or smart or even interesting. What do you even talk about for so many hours? What could she even have to say? I just think she's one of those friends you will have in high school. Then she'll go on to become a nobody and you'll forget about her." At that point, I started crying, so I hung up. Between all these insults, my friend would say things like, "Mom, and you don't know her. You've only met her twice." She and I still talk every day, despite living states apart. Her mom is a very toxic person, and she refuses to talk to her mom anymore. I never told her I overheard what her mom said, but it did a lot of damage to my self-conscious teenage self. Story 48. Happened last year when I was 17. I was at a wedding for people who I didn't know, so I went to a hallway, found a chair, and had my eyes closed trying to fall asleep while my 2 brothers and everyone else I knew were partying. I did a sport and had a 5 o'clock a.m. practice that day. It was already midnight, so I was pretty tired. I heard my dad talking around the corner to someone. The guy acknowledged that I was asleep, and my dad told him, "Yeah, whatever my son over there doesn't have, the other 2 have." Ouch. Story 49. Mom calling dad, then aunt, then grandma, asking all of them to please take us kids for the weekend because we were being so annoying and she needed a break. Good advertising there, Mom. Because of that, when my kid is in the same house as me, I only say the good things about him. In fact, I make it a point to say nice things that he'll overhear before going to bed, especially when he's been in a crappy mood and wouldn't be receptive to compliments. Story 50. A guy talking real loud into his phone about the employee he was going to fire. The conversation started before we boarded, was momentarily disrupted by the flight, then resumed the second we landed. TBH, that employee probably got lucky getting away from that dude. Story 51. You know that school in Achille, Oklahoma, where the transgender kid is getting shoot on because she just happens to live in the center of redneckery? I live 5 miles from that town in a slightly larger center of redneckery. I was at the bar at Applebee's, only place to get a beer and food after work, don't judge. And the people across from me were talking about it. Apparently, they didn't want their Christian kids to go to school with an it from the devil. The thing also was special enough to use the teacher's restroom. I sometimes get culture shock in my own hometown. I can't wait to move and never look back. Story 52. I used to be in the Army. I was taking a dump and a squad leader, and the platoon sergeant came to use the urinals, and I overheard them talking about how PT the next morning was just going to be all the NCOs smoking everyone else because one guy got a DUI. I went to sick call instead of dealing with their bullshit. Definitely wasn't the worst thing I overheard. Just a story I chuckle about every now and again. Story 53. I don't usually share stuff like this, but here it goes. One year, my family decided to take a trip to our house on the Cape in the summer. Everything was going great. The house was really nice. Literally nothing could put a damper on it. However, during that trip, my mom found out my father was cheating on her. I sat in my room trying to watch Netflix when I heard a crash come from downstairs. My mom threw a lamp at my dad when she found out. After that, I heard, "Are you going to tell the kids about that whore and your kid? Because if you don't, I will." As a kid, my dad always went away for work, and we joked about him being with his second family. Well, it turned out to be true. I will never see my father the same. Story 54. In high school, I dated this girl for 3 years. First love, first everything. The end of senior year came about, and as my 2 and only closest friends were saying their goodbyes before I came down the stairs, I heard them talk about how great my girl was at giving head and being on top, and that I was very lucky to have her. They noticed me standing there shortly after saying what they did. I couldn't say anything back. I was trying to hold back on crying, and I knew if I had opened my mouth, there would have been some of that ugly wailing crying. So I just ran the opposite way and got in my car and left. I called my girl and asked if what they were saying was true, and after a silent pause, all she said was, "I guess I'm not a good person," and hung up. I trusted those 3 with my life, and they knew everything about me. They were my best friends, and she was my first everything, as I was for her. It still hurts to think about after almost 5 years, and it really leaves a mark on you. I'm so different now, more closed off, less trusting of others. I'm careful about who I let into my life and who I tell things. I also now have a beautiful wife and a beautiful 5-month-old boy, and things honestly couldn't be better. I read so many bad stories in this thread, and some just recently happened to you guys. All I can say is just keep focusing on you. Things will get better for you, and you will be happy, I promise. Story 55. So I'm not the one who overheard something, but instead was the one overheard. I was talking to my friend about a story where I mixed up my mom's phone number with my number, since they are only off by 1 number. A person walked past right as I said. My mom sent me a text saying someone I met at a bar last once to me. Literally the worst part of the entire conversation. The woman who walked past me had a look of disgust and shock on her face. My friend loved it. Story 56. My son's private duty nurse couldn't hear very well, so she had a tendency to speak loudly on the phone. Overheard her take a call from her sister about their brother, who had made a miraculous recovery from organ failure after a tragic end attempt. She told her sister that she'd triple-checked the life insurance policy. They were the beneficiaries, and he'd had it long enough to cover tragic end. So get him whatever he needs to do it right this time. Story 57. Coworker comes in after 3 days off due to sickness. Proceeds to tell another coworker, good friend of hers, that she used a bucket for all her bathroom needs those 3 days. A poop bucket, as it were. The debilitating sickness that caused this? The common cold? Story 58. I worked in a hair salon, and it had a small yard behind it where customers could smoke. The bathroom was also out there in a separate room. It was a really old 1800s building. I opened the door. I must have been pretty quiet, and I overheard a customer talking on the phone about how her 3 kids had been taken off her because she neglected them, and how social services had said she'd never get them back unless she left her abusive boyfriend. She said she'd chosen her boyfriend and could have more kids. When she came back in, she was all smiles and talked about the holiday she wasn't going on in a week. I could barely muster a fake smile. Every time she came in, she had an over-the-top, fake happy personality, and she honestly gave me the creeps. Story 59. I left home at 18 because I lived in a toxic household with conservative Christianity as the excuse and mental illness as the aggravator. It should come to no surprise, but over the phone, I heard my mother telling my youngest sister that she hoped she became nothing like me. This hurt for 2 reasons. My sister is extremely like me, and to know that she is going through exactly what I went through, or worse, in a bid to stop her from becoming like me, hurts. I left that home with so many issues, and I know that not only her, but my other siblings will eventually leave with a set of their own. I'm trying to talk to them frequently enough and alleviate the poison my mom is pouring into their minds, but my youngest sister is already depressed and much more. It's difficult because they are homeschooled, so they only have me and other family members. They are totally isolated, as I was, and surrounded with religious propaganda. The reason for my mom to love me in her own way, love me when convenient to tout her good deeds to her church and pyramid scheme groupies, is because I'm queer, living with my same intimacy significant other outside the bounds of marriage. Forget that I am successful, am currently pursuing 2 degrees to further my success in my adult life, and am combating my own laundry list of mental health issues and disabilities. Forget that I succeeded past everything she set me up against. I am queer, and that is a sin. Despite all of my accomplishments and the work I have put in to make sure that I can help my siblings escape when their time comes and on some level make her proud, none of it matters because I am queer. Answer: yes, I would love to have such a hardworking, motivated, loving, thoughtful, caring, strong child. I would be as proud as punch if you were mine. I admire your bravery in being yourself when your home life was so full of religious rules. Be kind to yourself, as the journey to wholeness can be uncomfortable and longer than we hoped. I don't know you, Ovs, but have massive admiration for your guts and tenacity and perseverance. Story 60. My girlfriend left a message on the wrong phone. She was trying to contact the guy she was cheating on me with, but accidentally called me, left a message about me. I won't go into the details of the message, but the whole situation was just incredibly awkward and heartbreaking for me. Story 61. I used to deliver pizza. One day I was at work, and 2 of the girls that worked the slice counter were tittering and giggling. Names have been changed to protect the innocent. What are you 2 up to? I ask. Jeremy has a tiny male body part. One of them answers. God damn it, I scream internally. Not only do I not want to know that about my work friend and have to be secretly kind of sad for him all the time now, but I imagine 2 cute girls gossiping and giggling about one's tiny male body part is the nightmare scenario for the owner of said male body part. Story 62. I was waiting for a friend in the medical lobby, and there was a little blonde girl about 6 years old who kept misbehaving. I overheard a man, which I assumed was the father, that she was a little meanie and that he doesn't love her. The woman, I'm guessing the mom, got angry and defended her daughter. Story 63. I'm 18 now, and this happened sometime in my middle year of middle school, so I don't remember every little detail about what was said. But my friend and I had to stay after school one day for our choir class and happened to stumble across a kid in the hall. He was crying and stumbling around, and I asked him what was wrong and if he needed any help. I remember my friend telling me to let it go because he wasn't saying anything and kept crying, so we left him, and I told one of the teachers about it. After we went to class, I believe I left something in my locker. Again, I don't quite remember. I just know that I left the room for some reason, and overheard one of the teachers talking to the kid. He was bawling and yelling about how he didn't want to go home because his dad beat him. The teacher said she was going to take him to the office to talk to the principals, but he said that he didn't want to because if his dad figured out that he told someone, his dad was actually going to eliminate him. When I came back, he was gone, but I'm never going to forget the pain in his face and the breaking of his voice as I walk by them. It breaks my heart, and I still always think about him. I've never seen him in school before or after that, so I can't say I have any updates on what happened to him. I just wish I could go back and give him a hug. I hope he's okay and doing better now. Story 64. I was on a bus trying to listen to music. This girl sat beside me and was talking so loud I could hear it over my headphones. She said, "Yeah, I'm working real hard to get my daughter back. I've been clean for over a year." Pause. Ecstasy. Ecstasy? Doesn't count. I'm sorry for that girl's daughter. Story 65. Over the course of a week, I overheard the implosion of my neighbor's marriage. They lived in the apartment above us. Constant yelling and stomping, followed by sobbing. I would put on headphones when it got real bad. Then after about a week, the wife moved out. It was super awkward. We tried to avoid them and give them space, but we shared a driveway and back patio. Hope they're doing better. Really made me appreciate my happy marriage. Story 66. I found a phone on the seat next to me on a night bus. The person who dropped it had just finished typing, but not sending a text message. "I miss you so much. I cry all the time." I truly meant to contact someone to try to return the phone, but it ran out of batteries and locked. Never found out whose it was. Story 67. Not me, but my old boss. He heard someone getting takedown while he was asleep in bed. He rushed out and tried to save the victim while his wife called the cops. Victim died, they caught the guy, and the old boss had to go to court as a witness. It really affected badly for a long time. It was a stabbing, I believe, so blood everywhere. Story 68. I was in Girl Scouts and was going to dinner with my troop one evening. My mom and I arrived to the restaurant and parked and stepped out of the car at the same time as the rest of the girls in my troop. I was already a little hurt that they had carpooled without me, but whatever. I ended up wearing identical blouses with one of the girls, who I thought was my best friend at the time. We had bought together at the mall a few days earlier. I smile and say, "Hey, we're matching." She rolls her eyes jumps back in the car, and grabs a hoodie and zips it up to hide her blouse before stomping past me without a word. The other two girls catch up to her ahead of me and whisper, asking why she put on the jacket. I had caught up to them as well at this point. Thinking I wasn't behind them, she loudly complains, "I don't want to be twinsies with her. I don't want people thinking we're like friends or anything." It's been like 7 or 8 years since this happened, but darn, it still hurts. From a moral perspective, it's not the worst I've overheard, but emotionally nothing stings as much. Story 69. High school teacher here. So I overhear all sorts of shoot I wish I hadn't. A more recent example, just this past school year, was a conversation between two boys, looking at Snapchat on their phones. They were trying to decipher whether or not they were getting private pictures from the same girl. I recall one of them saying, "Oh no, her private area is way droopier than that. It can't be the same chick." I walked away and tried not to give away how mortified I was. Teenagers, man. Story 70. My mom yelled at me for doing something wrong like usual, and when I went into the back hallway to redo the thing, I think it was just cleaning the hallway, I overheard her saying, "Jesus Christ,